So you experience the passage without the illustration. One group got the illustration before they heard the passage. And think about it for a moment, just look at the illustration and realize what it triggers in terms of background knowledge for what you're about to hear. By looking at the illustration, you can sort of have a sense of, well, this is a relationship between this guy who is serenading, in a sense, this woman up there. So the serenade scenario or schema comes to bear. The understanding of music and speakers and realizing it's nighttime and how rich this is in terms of its ability to trigger things that enable a person to make meaning from the text. And let me just read it for you one more time. If the balloons popped, the sound wouldn't be able to carry, since everything would be too far away from the correct floor. A closed window would also prevent the sound from carrying, since most buildings tend to be well insulated. Since the whole operation depends upon a steady flow of electricity, a break in the middle of the wire would also cause problems. Of course, the fellow could shout, but the human voice is not loud enough to carry that far. An additional problem is that a string could break on the instrument. Then there could be no accompaniment to the message. It is clear that the best situation would involve less distance. Then there would be fewer potential problems. With face-to-face contact, the least number of things could go wrong. When you have the picture, you can use the text in a fairly selective way to confirm your sense of what's going on. And it was a very powerful way of John showing across groups, the group that again didn't get the picture and the group that got the picture, of the power of one schema to help in the making of meaning. He also had a third group who got the picture after it. They remained somewhat frustrated by the experience, and their recall wasn't terribly well enhanced. I think they're, for whatever reason, their initial encounter with the text still had an overriding sort of influence. But this wonderful experiment by John was powerful in really establishing the power of the demonstration of the role of background knowledge, and moreover, the role at the point of encoding, of your making of meaning, of your first, in a sense, reading of the text. That it's your background knowledge that enables the use of the text to refine, as Alan Collins suggested in the work of the other video, of being able to refine the meaning of the text. And it's not just background knowledge at a sort of a simple detail level. It's background knowledge, an understanding of the night, of being in love, of music, of relationships that can come to bear in terms of understanding a text. I know for those of us seeing John's experiment today, remember this was done in 1972 before we had Bluetooth, because probably most of you would have thinking, why is this guy doing this crazy stuff? And in reality, with these, why doesn't he use a drone if he's going to do something as stupid as this or something along those lines? John had another experiment where he demonstrated a similar phenomenon, and indeed this passage which I'm going to share with you is one of my favourite passages. Indeed, as I said, some of my cricket passages have become well known in the literature. These two text experiences that John provided have become sort of seminal citations in the literature. So let me read you the other passage. It's not related to this image, so hopefully the image won't interfere, and you'll bring to bear on this passage a different schema. So let me again read it to you without giving you any help in terms of activation of schema. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that's the next step. Otherwise, you're pretty well set. It's important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. It's difficult to foresee any end to the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one can never tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the material into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, they'll be used once more, and the whole cycle will then have to repeat it. However, that's a part of life. Now, I have a little bit of advantage. I know what the schema is for this passage, which I'll give you shortly. So you would think my reading of it would be a little better given I know the schema. But so you've heard the passage, and did you, any of you, have a schema that helped you understand it? Let me give you the schema, and for you to experience, like John was able to demonstrate across groups of students, the power of one's background knowledge prior to reading it to help with the encoding of a text. The schema is about washing clothes. So you're washing clothes, you're in a laundry, you bring that schema to bear. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that's the next step. Otherwise, you're pretty well set. It's important not to overdo things. I can go on with it, but you can sort of see again how quickly having that background knowledge triggered by that scenario, that's understanding of the laundry, how that enables your comprehension, and how important that bringing that background knowledge, activating it, accessing it, helps you not just understand the text, but actually build a meaning for the text. Well, John's early work here was foundational in terms of establishing the background knowledge, a thesis. That is how important it is to have the background knowledge. But having the background knowledge isn't enough. You need to access it, and you need to have actively engaged that background knowledge as you make sense of the world around you, and in the context of reading when you're reading a text. How important it is for you as a teacher or an educator or at any level to engage students in bringing their background knowledge to bear. I always find it I struggle when a teacher sometimes will sort of say, well, what if my kids don't have the background knowledge? Well, they do have background knowledge. They might not have and sometimes it's an issue of finding the relevant background knowledge they can use with a particular text. Or you may need to ask yourself is whether or not you've got a curriculum which is relevant to their lives. And so this background knowledge thesis doesn't just guide us in our understanding of meaning making, but helps us begin to formulate ideas which might help students in their learning, particularly in classrooms and particularly in the context of reading text.